Traditional economics operate under the notion that individual economic agents are driven by self-interest, and all agents engage in rational decision-making based on the available information they have. Unfortunately, such a notion largely exists in theory, and the real world is full of examples of which decision-making is neither rational nor in the self-interest of the individual. Behavioral economics as a field attempts to understand the effect of the individual psychological processes, including emotions, norms, and habits on individual decision-making in a variety of economic contexts. In a nutshell, it challenges the long-held view in mainstream economics that individuals are unemotional maximizers who make rational decisions and offer suggestions as to how individuals can be nudged towards more effective decision-making. Drawing on an example from the real world, an advert that was published to promote the sale of The Economist magazine. One advert was shown to a sample of respondents who were presented with three options. Firstly, to opt for the online publication alone. Secondly, to opt for the hard copy publication alone. Lastly, to opt for the hard copy and the online publications together. In this scenario, there was no difference in price between the print subscriptions alone and the online publication together with the print edition. Not surprisingly, people were very much in favor of the offer, which included the online publication together with the hard copy, and no one could see the value of the print subscription as a standalone. As a fair comparison, a balanced sample of people was shown a similar offer, but this time there were only two options: the online edition alone, or the print edition and the online version together. Notably, there was no option to choose the print subscription alone. In this case, 68% of people chose the online option without the printed copy. It is clear from this that the context of the question very much affects the answer. Showing three options, where one was clearly a bad deal, in this case the hard copy publication alone, pushed people to opt for the bundled hard copy and the online publication deal, which seemed like a much better option. As we see, removing one of the options changed people's behavior considerably. Organ donation, a crucial component of any country's healthcare sector, is a good example in which behavioral economics is applied, primarily in the interest of encouraging a larger participation rate in organ donation. Such a policy application is built under the theoretical foundation of status quo bias, namely the inherent inertia in people to tend not to deviate from a given default option, or to expend effort to reverse an earlier decision. Historically low participation rates in organ donation have been a concern in several countries. A distinctive feature of some of these countries is a requirement for an individual to opt in, which requires one to actively sign up to be listed as a potential donor to participate in organ donation. Behavioral economics offer an insight that the status quo bias, as aforementioned, could be responsible for the low organ donation rates of some of these countries. An experiment done by Johnson and Goldstein involving the changing of the default option to make donor status an opt-out rather than opt-in recorded an astonishing increase in consent to organ donation from 42% to 82%. A key inference from this drastic change from a mere change of the framing is such that decisions often involves effort, whereas accepting the default is effortless. Also, decision makers might believe that defaults are suggestions by the policy makers, which imply a recommended action. This experiment evidently demonstrates that individuals could be potentially influenced by the framing of a default option, and the recognition and application of such could be used to perk up participation rates in organ donations. A comparison of European countries in a market research article published by B2B International shows that despite coming from largely similar cultural backgrounds, several countries distinctively differ in participation rates of organ donations. The distinction is strongly reflected in the framing of the default option of their respective organ donation consent forms. As we can infer from the empirical data, default options present in the organ donation forms play a crucial role in influencing organ donation participation rates in these countries. Other applications include automatic enrollment in saving programs, which have a long-lasting beneficial effect on individual retirement savings. A government's willingness in areas where people are reluctant could go a long way in bringing about positive change for the country. Another concrete example of behavioral economic application in public policy is smoking cessation. Aside from generic negative effects on one's personal health, smoking may lead to a decline in productivity and incur high costs in both public and private healthcare. As such, it represents a notable concern which several governments seek to address. The linkage to an application of behavioral economics could be explained by the concept of loss aversion, which is a tendency of people to prefer avoiding losses to acquiring equivalent gains, and it is prominently applied to incentivize smoking cessation. A notable study conducted by David Halpern, head of UK's Behavioural Insight team, illustrates this. 3 randomized groups were given an option to participate in this study, and a biochemical test for cotinine concentration in saliva was used to determine if an individual successfully quit smoking. The first group was promised rewards of $800 for biochemically confirmed abstinence. The second, $650 in reward payments, along with a refundable deposit of $150 for biochemically confirmed abstinence. The catch was, participants in the second group run the risk of losing the $150 deposit in the event where the biochemical test registers a positive trace for cotinine. The third was just given informational resources and free smoking cessation aids. 94.8% of the participants presented with the first purely reward-based programs accepted it, as compared to the 12.6% acceptance rate of those presented with the deposit-based program. For the deposit-based group, the loss aversion was strongly evident from the deterred participation in the program for the fear of losing the deposit. In the 6 months after the start of the experiment, biochemical analysis depicted a notably higher rate of sustained abstinence from smoking in each of the 2 incentive-based programs as compared to the third without incentives. Evidently, incentives provide sufficient endeavor for people to abstain from smoking for a sustained duration. More crucially, the rate of abstinence at 6 months was a staggering 13.2 percentage points higher in the deposit-based program than in the purely reward-based program. The risk of losing the deposit visibly appears to have a pronounced impact on those in the deposit-based program in their quest to quit smoking, more than just the associated potential rewards of $650. With appropriate implementation of loss aversion, deposit-based programs could be introduced in public and could be particularly influential in helping people in resolutions, such as smoking cessations and dieting plans. Oppositions to the application of behavioral economics so exist between societal agents and the policy makers. For instance, well-applied behavioral economics may bring about beneficial changes such as increasing participation rates in organ donation. Some may grossly misinterpret this policy as subtle deceit of the public as opposed to one geared towards enhancing public good. In light of such considerations, governments, such as the one in Singapore, have tried to bridge the asymmetric information gap by establishing a strong healthcare information structure while emphasizing on the free will rather than the enforcement of organ donation participation. While we recognize there exist limitations in the application of behavioral economics in public policy, the huge benefits it encompasses should not be obscured by issues which could be resolved and managed with careful legislation and planning. Many issues, including those previously mentioned, still exist in the public sphere, and the application of behavioral economics may be the effective remedy to some of these issues. The application of behavioral economics should not relate to jamming square pegs in round holes, but could be carefully phased in to gradually bring about beneficial societal changes through relevant implementation in public policy. Through sound theoretical reasoning and proven empirical success, the application of behavioral economics has found relevance in the domain of public policy. Looking ahead, we can only hope such a novel and exciting ideology will continue to find its footing in modern-day contexts through sensible implementation and reasonable regulation. Thank you. We hope you enjoyed this video.